Fans are utterly stupid sometimes, aren't they? I mean, they're so fickle. And, you know, they win a cup final, great. But did they have the blinkers on for the rest of the season? You know, just... And anything else. You know, they've had, as Augie said, they've had a review. The review was the season. The review was the performances. The review was the batterings that they took from less than mediocre sides in the Premier League. Yeah, you can win games. Wigan won the FA Cup. They beat Manchester City like Man United did. They were relegated. You don't judge on the odd game against Liverpool and Manchester City and say, well, you know, we've derailed other people's seasons. That's not what a football club should be about. A football club should be about not looking at other teams and how you've disrupted them, but what you have done yourself. And yes, they won the cup, but the rest of it was absolutely dire. And quite frankly, the longer that Ineos are in there, and it hasn't been long, the more you doubt their ability actually to bring to Man United what many thought they were, which was utter clarity in the way they were going to go. You know, they're going to have egg in their face if Manchester United play in the first 3 or 4 months of next season like they played in the first 3 or 4 months of this season. Big decisions had to be made, and they have not made it.
I think that's the thing, and you talk about how fickle football fans are, which we know. And while, yes, you finished the season on a relative high, given the FA Cup final, as you say, Manchester United don't start well next season. And all of a sudden, maybe you go from talking about Erik Ten Hag and extending his contract, or whether he renews by that point, to all of a sudden, 6-8 games in, what's the cheapest way to move on from Erik Ten Hag and who's available? I just feel that if you base your decisions around the reaction of the fans after a game, even as big and as important a game as the FA Cup final, I'm not sure that that's the foundation you start with from Ineos's perspective in terms of making footballing decisions.
To that point, Mark, what is it that the fans have seen that maybe we haven't, where they feel that Erik Ten Hag deserves another season? Or is this just everybody hunkering down, going, everyone's against us, everyone's against Ten Hag, we will show them?
There's definitely a bit of that, but I agree with the guys in the sense that, you know, fans think with their heart and their emotion, don't they? And I think if you're a football club, you have to be cold about it and make the decision that is best for the club rather than what the fans want. And I think, you know, in many ways, the fans at some point were really down on the players. A lot of the United players, they feel that have let down successive managers, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, even Jose Mourinho, and they think that certain players, I mean, one of them being Anthony Martial, he was there from Louis van Gaal's time right through to the end of last season, and they feel that he epitomised the fact that so many players survived at Old Trafford when they weren't performing, and they survived manager after manager, and Jose Mourinho tried to get Martial out of the club, but he couldn't do it, that these players just didn't deliver enough on the pitch to justify surviving or outlasting so many managers. So even when we had that horrendous defeat at Crystal Palace, the fans were happy to blame the players because they felt the players had let Ten Hag down. Now, that gave Ten Hag an incredible kind of security blanket, which he probably didn't earn, because it certainly it detracted from the reality of what was happening on the pitch. You know, a minus goal difference last season. They finished on -1 goal difference. They finished 8th. They finished so far off the top of the table. I think it was 30-odd points from behind Man City. But all this was kind of overlooked because they felt that Ten Hag had got tough with certain players, Jadon Sancho being one, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo last season, Marcus Rashford this season. A lot of fans think that Ten Hag has been the medicine that Man United need. And it may well be that, but, you know, the alternative view is that he's been a bit too tough with the players and they're not performing because they don't like his man management. But the fans have made their decision that they think this guy is what Man United need, what this dressing room needs. And I think Ineos have finally realised that after the cup final that is it really worth antagonising the fan base by bringing in a coach who would not be universally popular? The point being made is that we've known for a while now that Gareth Southgate was their first choice. He's got a good relationship with Dave Brailsford, Dan Ashworth, who's coming in. And I think in an ideal world for United that they would have appointed Southgate, but it's not an ideal world because we've got the Euros starting on Friday, and if England do well, they might be playing the Euros into the final on I think the 15th of July. Man United's first pre-season game is the day after. So it doesn't work in that time frame. But what somebody told me back in March at United was that they are working towards next season with Ten Hag, but if it doesn't go well, the ideal scenario would be keep him in place at the start of next season, and then if it doesn't start well, Gareth Southgate's available in November. And it's a very short-sighted look at things because you don't want to waste another year. But, you know, I think that they've come into the club, there's so many problems to address, and the big one that they have to address, the manager, they've decided, not quite sure I want to make this call because the fans might get upset with us and there's no obvious candidate to replace him. So they've fudged it, really.
Here's the thing, Robbo, yeah? The first 2-3 months of next season, what have we seen, with the exception of the game against Liverpool and against a hungover Manchester City in the FA Cup, that suggests that, that Manchester United are trending in anywhere but the right direction under Ten Hag, that all of a sudden everything is going to come together for the start of next season?
You've seen nothing that will suggest it's all going to come together, because when you've seen Manchester United play at their very worst, they've been disjointed, there's been no leadership from the side of the field. Of course the players haven't been good enough. Of course there's been a lot of anger amongst the players and about the man management. But the manager, in terms of tactics, until the cup final, hadn't got it right. And there was games where things were going wrong, and he just stood on the side and looked almost dazed at times. That's when you want the manager to come out and change one or two things, and he didn't really do so. The club has been, or the team under him has been on a downward spiral for a long time this season, and it didn't look as though it was going to get any better. They had that. I mean, if they'd have lost to Coventry in the semi-final of the Cup, it would have been an absolute disaster. Everybody would have written him off then. But they got back into that game, they win the cup final, and suddenly he stays in the job. It's madness.
Well, it doesn't make sense, as Stuart said, because they were a big toe away from getting knocked out by a championship side, that offside. So does that make him the man to go into next season? You know, he did have his problems this year. There's no getting away from it. But they were outplayed. So, and by the way, don't let yourself believe that he went into some of these games early on in the season threadbare. It was only when the season went on that the injuries really started to kick in, and they were getting outplayed by a lot of teams at the start of the season. I think it was their worst ever Premier League finish. As Augie said, they were in a minus goal difference. They got knocked out of the Carabao Cup at home by Newcastle reserves. They finished bottom of their Champions League group, and they were absolutely woeful to watch. Cup final apart, this is just... It's just bonkers. It just smacks to me of Ineos not really knowing what they want to do or where they want to go, and been frightened to me. If you're pandering to fans at this stage, that's a problem. You cannot pander to the supporters in big business. You cannot. You have to make hard and fast decisions. And look, they may be better next year when they get some players. And by the way, they won't be going to him and saying, "What do you think about this player in Holland?" Because of you've only got to look at what he's brought in. So he may have to work with what he has to work with. And I've no doubt they will be better than they were this year. They certainly should be. But I do not think he is the man. And I think it was shown this year in a lot of games against teams, I'm going to say in the bottom six in the Premier League, home and away, that he was, as Robbo said, devoid of ideas when they were swimming against the tide.